So we're here at the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum Tankfest weekend 2022, and here's one of the vehicles on static display today, which is the Pz.Kpfw IV. This was running around yesterday, so it is a runner, which is fantastic. So it's one of the earlier versions of the Pz.Kpfw IV, still sporting the 7.5 centimetre or 75mm howitzer, designed primarily for infantry support and breaking strong points in its role as an infantry support tank. This D version has some armour increases compared to the earlier iterations. It reintroduced the mounted machine gun to the tank, which was previously only on the A variant. You can see it's got the standard Pz.Kpfw IV type chassis setup. So you've got 8 small road wheels, final drive at the front and engine at the rear. So of course it's using a different sort of suspension configuration to the Pz.Kpfw III, which we saw earlier. The Pz.Kpfw III had torsion bars on it, and typically you'd find a torsion bar suspension would be giving you a better ride. But this vehicle, given that it was designed primarily to support infantry, and it's when it was conceived had a different kind of suspension setup that was probably more suited for lower speed operation. As an early Pz.Kpfw IV chassis, you can see it's also got the 4 return rollers, which were eventually reduced down to 3 as part of cost reduction and simplification. And of course, those return rollers here are still rubber mounted, which is phenomenal, given that those parts don't touch the ground, so you're not going to get much benefit from having them rubber lined. But I guess the Germans didn't realise how long the war would go and how short supply their rubber would be. So at the back of the deck here, we have a typical Pz.Kpfw IV layout, which didn't change much through production. Hooks for wrapping up the tow cable, and a typical Pz.Kpfw IV exhaust. And in this configuration, you've got the standard earlier type tracks on the Pz.Kpfw IV. Moving back around to the front here, you can see they've got the bar at the front mounted for carrying spare track, and the stepped out configuration that brings the driver's position somewhat forward with a little extra pistol port next to the gunner's position. And you can see how it narrows in with that angle towards the radio operator / gunner's position. And there we have, you can see the early style mantlet with the 7.5 centimetre infantry support howitzer in place. It's an interesting turret when you think about it from an engineering point of view. There's lots of parts which need to come together and be cut fairly precisely in order to allow the welding to occur. But of course, the Germans could do that because they were welding hulls and welding turrets when a lot of other countries were still stuck riveting. But there's a lot of parts here. You can see that there's fairly thick plates here, which are in fact not just curved but somewhat bowed. So pressing operations to make everything come together. So quite a complex engineering feat, I would think, even today, to put together something such as this. See the later commander's coupler. So much better vision offered than the early couplers on the Pz.Kpfw IVs. One of the things I really like is this little detail here, which is a wooden device for the antenna to stow in. So when you need to stow the antenna, you can fold it down, and it just runs in this little rail here, which is mounted to the hull side. So yep, Pz.Kpfw IV Ausf.D here at the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum. Just one of the Pz.Kpfw IVs. I think they've got 4 or 5. I mean, I rode around in a G. There's a J, which is probably the most numerous production run. There's one of those running around, and in many different liveries too. But only a couple of hundred of these were ultimately produced. So really interesting, really fantastic that there's one of these here at the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum. And sitting right next to its sibling, the Pz.Kpfw III, which was the breakthrough tank at the start of the war for the Germans, operating in a different role to the Pz.Kpfw IV being used at that early part of the war as a infantry support vehicle, the Pz.Kpfw III being used to engage other tanks and break through, which is why it had the suspension that was more suited for cross-country great to see another Panzer IV here at the museum.